Good morning to all. So yesterday, we are a population. So that was a population. That was mainly the dynamics of population. So that was mainly there should be the population growth curves are completed, and we also started in previous class the structure of population, and the structure of population that was included number of the organisms, and population dynamics is there, and the another topic that is ecological succession is there. So today's we are going to discuss about the population dynamics and ecological succession. So the population that was mainly, so that may contain the different types of a group of members which are used to live for per a unit of area, a unit of time, and a particular area. So in the middle of those are the based components so for so population growth curves, and the population dynamics, the population structure, and population dynamics. So that was population dynamics that was mainly occurred see here. So it was mainly occurred with the help of natural hazards. So any natural hazards are those natural hazards are mainly, so that was tsunamis, earthquakes, and the floods, so thunderstorms. So with the help of these what happens is so the particular areas, the organisms which are presented, so the population which are permitted by particular area are completely removed from that particular ecosystem. So that was completely washed out. So any organism may not be so going to be lived at that particular area. So those are mainly considered as that was natural hazards are mainly considered as population dynamics. The population dynamics was natural hazards. So it leads to cause another mechanism, that is ecological succession. The ecological succession is nothing but, so any the earthquakes are occurred on the surface of the earth. So that was leads to cause the collapsing of the population. So in a large amount of population are easily collapsed and removed from the environment. Not only the larger organisms and smaller, that is the plants, microorganisms, all are washed out from the particular ecosystem. And the floods are also caused. So those are also, those mechanism is also leads to cause the completely removing of the organisms are also removed in particular area. So these are mainly helpful. So if the population was completely removed from an ecosystem, again what happens is the ecosystem was again reformed. The particular environment, the ecosystem was again reformed, reconstructed. So the particular area was going to be reconstructed. You know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki at there. So with the help of the bomb effect, what happens is the nuclear bomb effect will leads to cause so that was mainly the removing of a particular the total organisms or the population was completely washed away. But after 10 years of time, 20 years of time, what happens is the reconstruction of ecosystem was started at there. So the gradual development of some small organisms, microorganisms, and small plants, and after that larger trees and smaller the organisms, and the population growth rate that was completely increased, and ecosystem structure was again reconstructed. So that mechanism was considered here as a succession mechanism. It was mainly two types, that is a hydrosphere and xerosphere. So it was in water, it was a bare rock. So the hydrosphere, The succession, ecological succession is again two types. One is a hydrosphere, another one is a xerosphere. The hydrosphere was it takes place inside the water. That is the development of the animals, the development of an ecosystem with the help of the population. So those organisms are reconstruction of an aquatic ecosystem, reconstruction of an ecosystem after completion of the floods. So the organisms which are presented inside the water media are completely washed out. So again a reconstruction of water was ecosystem was takes place. So that mechanism was hydrosphere. And a reconstruction of bare rock area, the rocks. The rocks are also useful for the living of particular organism. So till to the completion of some years of time. So it can take some more time to reconstruction of the population and the rock areas also, bare rock areas also. That was considered as the bare rock area. The reconstruction of an ecosystem was considered as a xerosphere, and the water media, that was a hydrosphere. First we move on to discuss about the hydrosphere now. Sphere means so these are the stages, and those are also considered as several stages. And so pioneers, several stage 1, several stage 2, several stage 3, several stage 4, and the climax stage. So totally, see here the development of an each and every ecosystem, reconstruction of an ecosystem that may involved in so mainly that was the water media, aquatic media may included this type of mechanism. The pioneers are the initiators. Pioneers are always the initiators for the participation, and they can place a major role in the reconstruction of an ecosystem. And the pioneers are again converted to, they are going to form the several stage. So severals are the stages, so developmental stages. So several stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. After completion of those 5 stages, at the end of so it was the climax stage is a very crucial. That was mainly, so that was tells as to the ecosystem, the washed out ecosystem was again reformed completely, that was fulfilled completely, that was completely fulfilled. So that is a climax stage. So now we are going to see the, so how the development of was occurred inside the aquatic media. That was So, see here the stages are first phytoplankton stage and the zooplankton and the submerged stage and a floating and a marsh meadow stage reed swamp or woodland stage and a climax stage. So, in these submerged and marsh meadow here as the small herbs and the shrubs are developed here. See this, how the water ecosystem was again reconstructed after so completion of some any other natural hazards after so there is a washed out of a complete the organisms of the particular ecosystem. The ecosystem was again reconstructed itself. So, those reconstruction, how the reconstruction of on water media was started, that is a hydrosphere here, that was started with the stage of phytoplankton stage. That was a phytoplanktons. You know the blue green algae very well. So, those blue green algae are the first initiators here. So, in an ecosystem, mainly inside a water ecosystem, the pioneers are the initiators always. So, those are mainly used to start the reconstruction mechanism in an ecosystem that is mainly occurred inside the water media. So, the pioneers here are the initiators here are the phytoplanktons. The phytoplanktons are the initiators, those are the blue green algae. They can able to produce their own food materials. So, with the help of the utilization of the sunlight and remain other components. So, these are the phytoplankton stage. So, the phytoplanktons is so after completion of so they continue, they lead some life. Then what happens is so that was the zooplankton stage was initiated next. Why? Because the zooplanktons are small the larval stages of the organisms and euglena. So, like organisms are developed inside the water media. So, that was a paramecium, euglena. So, like organisms are developed. So, those are considered as zooplanktons. So, after the completion of the phytoplankton stage and the zooplanktons are developed at there. These zooplanktons can feed on those phytoplanktons like the blue green algae. So, these zooplanktons are used to feed, so they consume the phytoplanktons as their food material. So, then the zooplanktons are developed at there. So, they survived at there. After completion of the lifespan of zooplanktons, those are going to die. So, after completion of their lifespan, so then what happens is the dead and decay organic matter, for the dissolution of dead and decay organic matter, the decomposers are developed at there. The decomposing bacteria is developed inside the water. So, those decomposing bacteria are used to decompose so those dead particles of the zooplanktons are eaten by, and so those decomposing bacteria are converted so those are dead and decay organic matter into the useful nutrients. So, those nutrient levels are increased inside the water. So, that was used to increase that was the soil, the earth region inside the water. The humus was developed inside the water. So, by the dead and decay organic matter, that is a decomposing bacteria. So, those humus levels are increased inside the water. So, those humus levels are used to develop the another plants inside the water. So, the plant roots are developed. So, why? Because the plants without roots there is no plants. So, their the roots are very well developed inside the inner part of the water. So, deepest part of the water, and so those leaves are freely moved inside the water. So, that was considered as submerged stage, means those are not completely comes out from the water, so those are completely mingled, those are completely in the region of the water, they are completely lived inside the water, they can able to survive inside the water, so those are considered as a submerged stage. So these are Edogonium plants, some Edogonium, so those are like Vallisneria, Edogonium like plants are developed here, so those are submerged stage, the submerged plants are developed here, and nearby these some other organisms like the smaller crustaceans are developed here. Those crustaceans are nothing but the arthropodan organisms are developed here. So those arthropodan organisms are able to survive the submerged stage, and they can feed on these plant particles and the zooplanktons, and the zooplankton, those are going to feed on the zooplanktons, and they can able to survive it there. And after completion of the lifespan of these that was submerged plants and also the remaining crustaceans, those are also going to be die, and those are going to be decomposed with the help of decomposing bacteria. By the effect of that, what happens is the humus levels are increased. So here the submerged stage, the depth of the water is up to 20 feet, and come to submerged stage, the floating stage, so again the water levels are greatly reduced up to the 10 feet only, 8 to 10 feet. So the length of the depth of the water was going to be decreased. Why? Because so the humus levels are increased inside the water. The water was so inside the water, not only the water, by the effect of the decomposing bacteria, by the effect of the another organism, that is zooplanktons and that was the phytoplanktons and the submerged plants, and after completion of the lifespan, the dead particles by the decomposing bacteria. So by the effect of the decomposing bacteria, the humus levels are increased the water inside the water, that was used to decrease the depth of the water. That was used to decrease the depth of the water, means that was helpful for the living of the more organisms inside the water. So in this manner, the floating stage, next stage is the floating stage. So it was a Nilambo nucifera. So the lotus plants, so that was completely floated on the surface of the water. Their leaves and their flowers are completely on the surface of the water, and their stem part and their roots are completely inside the deepest part of the water. So on those way, so it was considered as a floating stage. So in these floating stage, another organism, those are the salamanders like organisms, and the larval stages of the frog, so all are developed here. The salamanders are also one of the amphibians, and the larval stage of the amphibians are going to be, so those development was started here, and they can able to survive here, so mainly inside the floating stage. So after completion of the floating stage and the completion of lifespan of salamanders and the larval stage of the frog, all are going to be die, and effect of those organisms, again what happens is by the effect of decomposing bacteria, those are also going to be decomposed, and the humus levels are increased. Then the water, the depth of the water is up to 4 to 6 feet only. So 20 feet up to the 8 to 10 feet and 4 to 6 feet. So gradually what happens is the depth of the water was gradually decreased. So that was mainly helpful for surviving of the some other plants, some other organisms there. And the floating stage, marsh meadow stage. So here some other plants and some larger organisms are also, that was the fishes can able to survive here. The more amount of the fishes was able to survive, and some other organisms are also able to so lived here. Some of the snakes, the water snakes, some of the snakes are presented inside the water, and some of the another crustaceans organism, that is arthropodan organism, and the molluscan organisms are also developed here. So that was a marsh meadow stage. So marsh means here is a, so the humus levels are greatly increased here. The stage was considered here as a marsh meadow stage. After completion of these, the reed swamp and a woodland stage is started here. The depth of the water is 1 to 2 feet only. So the reed swamp and a woodland, that is that was completely the water that was some the wetlands are formed. So, the water depth of the water was decreased, and the water the soil that was water the soil completely soil level was increased and the water levels are decreased, and both are mingled with each other. That was resemble like some that was a spongy texture, and so that was a wet the area was become very wet. So, at that region that was considered here as the reed swamp or woodland. Woodland means some smaller trees to the larger plants, that is some small first the herb stage, and another one the shrubs. Herbs and shrubs are developed at there, the herbaceous stage and the shrub stage. The herbaceous plants, some small creepers are developed. So, firstly some small creepers are developed, and another so some small shrubs are also developed there, some medium plants are developed here, and after completion of these, so that was completely replaced by the larger trees, and that was become converted to some, and a forest area was developed at there. Means, so completely by the natural hazards, the organisms that was the plants and the animals all are washed out from the environment. So, again the environment was going to be reconstructed from the water aquatic media. So, after completion of some floods, so what happens is the aquatic that was organisms which are presented inside the water, like the tsunamis, like those effect, what happens is completely the organisms which are presented inside the aquatic media, and some that was a larger trees, and small organisms, higher organisms, small plants, that was larger trees, all are washed out from that particular environment, and the ecosystem was completely interrupted, and ecosystem was completely disturbed. So, those ecosystem was again reconstructed. The reconstruction of ecosystem was takes place itself. The ecosystem was going to be reconstructed itself. So, those process was mainly involved these stages. So, always it was started from the pioneer stage. Pioneers are always initiators here. Here are the stages. So, those are considered as the several stages. So, pioneers are converted to several stage 1 and stage 2, that is a development, and several stage 3, several stage 4, and finally the climax stage. Pioneer stage 2, climax stage. So, number of the changes are occurred inside the in an aquatic media. So, those changes are helpful for the perfect fulfillment of the organisms. So, those organisms are mainly started from the phytoplanktons. Always the pioneers in aquatic media, pioneers are nothing but the initiators, the primary organisms. So, these are also nothing but the producers. Why? Because these can able to produce their own food materials. So, that is why these are mainly considered here as phytoplanktons. So, those are phytoplankton stage, some that was mainly blue-green algae. So, those are blue-green algae are mainly firstly formed organisms. Those organisms are able to produce, those are the precursor for the formation of the another organisms. Those are nothing but zooplanktons. Those zooplanktons are larval stages, and the euglena, paramecium like protozoan organisms are formed here, and those are the firstly formed animals in the water. After formation of phytoplanktons, these zooplanktons are feed on these phytoplankton stage, those are survived at there, and after leading some days of life, those after completion of their lifespan, those are going to be die. So, then immediately inside the water what happens is the decomposers are developed here. The decomposers are used to decompose so the dead and decay organic waste matter into the useful nutrients. So, those useful nutrients are developed inside the depth of the water. Those useful nutrients are helpful for the further development of the other organisms. Mainly that was helpful for those nutrients are very essential for the development of the plants. Why? Because the plants are developed from the roots only. So, the roots are development inside the water that should be occurred. So, those that was mainly the humus was increased inside the water, that is the soil fertility was increased inside the water. The soil fertility was helpful for the formation of the submerged plants are developed here. The submerged plants are developed here. Those submerged plants are also going to accommodate other organisms. Those are the some other salamanders like some other organisms are formed here. So, the larval stages of some other organisms are also formed here. The crustaceans are formed here. So those organisms are so the water levels are very depth here. For the firstly formation of phytoplankton stage, the depth of the water is up to 40 to 50. So that was gradually decreased up to the 20 feet. So that was a submerged plant stage, and some of the smaller organisms, and after that the floating stage. So after conversion of completion of submerged plant stage, that was going to be developed another plants, that is rooted plants, that is mainly so that was a Nilambo nucifera, you know very well, that is a lotus plants. So the lotus that was mainly the leaves are so easily observed on the surface of the water like a plate like structure of their leaves, and in the middle of two leaves, so that was the plantation, mainly the flowering was occurred. The flowers are also larger in size. Those are the mainly that was mainly lotus flowers. So those flowers can give the accommodation to the some other organisms, and those organisms at completion of these stage, the depth of the water is become 20 feet and up to the 8 to 10 feet and 4 to 6 feet. Why? Because the organisms are going to be die which are going to accommodate on the surface of these floated plants, and so those organisms are going to be die. After completion of those dead and decay organic matter are again converted to the useful nutrients by the decomposing bacteria. Then the soil fertility was increased, and so the depth of the water was increased, and what happens is so that was a bushy area, that becomes a very bushy area. So there was the depth of the water was decreased, and the soil was increased here, and that was a marsh meadow stage was increased here, and some other plants are developed here. So rooted plants and fishes or the another organisms are also going to be developed here. Some larger plants and like molluscan organism like the snails and so oysters, so are also developed here. And after completion of these, so the depth of the water was 1 to 2 feet and was single feet. So that was completely, the water levels are completely decreased here. So those wetland area, that was completely become wetland area. So that was mainly helpful for the that was helpful for development of the another stage, a woodland stage and a reed swamp. That is rooted plants. The large trees are developed here. So though larger trees are completely occupied these place, so that was the water levels, and the depth of the water was completely decreased, and that was completely formed by the fertility of soil was increased here. That was helpful for the larger trees. So larger trees are developed here. When the pioneer stage to the climax stage, so this type of development was considered here as the ecological succession inside the hydrosphere is completed. So it is today's topic. Today's topic is over. So we will meet tomorrow with that was the xerosphere, that was the development of the bare rock area. So today we are completed ecological succession in hydrosphere, that is inside the water, and what are the so development was occurred inside the rock area. So that was mainly inside the actually happened inside the desert areas. So we will discuss it tomorrow. Today's topic is over completely. So we will meet tomorrow. Thank you.